This video abstract is used to show the results detailed in the paper in animated form and provide context to these animations. For full details, please check the paper. While the long-term behavior of ice, driven by creep and melting, is well captured in ice models, the short-term and small-scale behavior near the terminus is less developed. This short-term behavior includes iceberg carving and ice cliff collapse events, both of which are driven by fracture-based instability mechanisms. Here, an ice-specific fracture and plasticity model is presented to capture this collapse at short timescales. To capture brittle cracks, a phase field fracture formulation is used. This spreads the discrete cracks over a finite region surrounding these cracks, allowing them to be captured through a continuous field. These cracks are driven by part of the elastic energy, specifically using a spectral stress split to only allow cracks to form under tensile stresses, thereby capturing mode 1 brittle cracks. When applied to compression tests with no confining pressure, cracks form in the center of the sample before branching outwards. Subsequent cracks form parallel to these first cracks, develop several crack branches, and eventually link to other cracks resulting in failure. As we are keeping the tensile strength constant between cases, changes in phase field length scale also change the fracture release energy. As a result, denser crack patterns are needed to dissipate comparable amounts of elastic energy, as shown here. While the crack pattern is more detailed, the overall mode of failure is still the same as when a coarser length scale was used, cracks forming in the center, branching sideways, and linking with parallel cracks to lead to eventual failure. Repeating this analysis for meshes with different element sizes, and using different phase field length scales shows the axial pressure at failure is mesh-independent and length-independent. While the length scale plays an important role in setting the details observed in crack patterns, the overall mode of failure does not depend on this scale. Moving on to the plastic yielding that is expected at larger confining pressures. To model the long-term behavior of ice, we use Glen's law to capture viscous creep. For the short-term plastic behavior, a Drucker-Prager model is used. Softening is included through an exponential softening function, allowing for shear bands to develop. Temperature dependence is included through a thermal model. This temperature in turn is used by the tensile strength, the yield strength, and the creep. Temporarily increasing the tensile strength of the ice to suppress cracks, we can investigate the mesh dependence of the plasticity model. A Kosarat continuum is used to regularize the shear bands, spreading them over a finite thickness. We can also look at the temperature changes happening at the shear bands, with the plastic dissipation causing several degrees of temperature change during the plastic failure. Increasing the length scale, we can control the thickness of the shear band, with increases in length scale spreading the shear band and associated heating over a larger region. However, while this length scale impacts the shear band thickness, simulations across a range of mesh sizes and length scales show that the impact of these parameters on the unloading behavior is limited. Furthermore, the maximum axial pressure before failure is nearly independent on this length scale and element size used. Combining both the brittle fracture model and the ductile shear band model, we can simulate triaxial tests in both 2D plane strain conditions and 3D conditions. When no confining pressure is applied, the failure behavior is brittle. Cracks grow from a small initial defect, split into multiple branches, and grow upwards to split the sample through the center. Repeating this for a range of confining pressures shows that the model captures both the ductile regime, dominated by plastic shear bands, and the brittle regime. Having shown to capture lab-scale experiments well, we now apply the model to ice cliff collapses. After allowing for an initial period to let the stresses settle under gravity, we suddenly remove the right-hand side boundary condition. A single mode 1 fracture forms at the surface, growing downwards to about half the glacier thickness. At the same time, a shear band develops from the bottom right corner, growing upwards. As the ice slides along this shear band, tensile cracks grow outwards from this shear band, causing blocks of ice to carve from the ice cliff. Eventually the shear band halts, resulting in a stable cliff face. A similar behavior is observed when we lower the temperature of the ice, while increasing the thickness of the glacier. A surface crevasse grows downwards, a shear band develops growing upwards, and cracks grow out of this shear band. However, as the ice slides along the shear band, a second crack develops which coincides with the shear band, stabilizing the ice cliff. If instead we consider free-slip basal conditions, the ice slides freely over the bed. While multiple cracks grow at the surface due to tensile stresses, removing the friction at the base prevents shear bands from developing. As a result, the ice cliff remains stable without any full-thickness failure events. Finally, we can apply the model to a range of different glacier heights and ice temperatures, demonstrating the importance of including temperature dependence within ice models. For the colder temperatures considered, Surface crevasses only grow when considering a 400-meter thick glacier. Reducing the temperature to -7.5 degrees allows the basal shear band to form, leading to eventual cliff failure at this temperature, like described earlier. Further increasing the temperature results in a more unstable cliff face. The shear band is now able to propagate to the first surface crevasse, causing a larger volume of ice to be lost. We also note that, as the shear band width is distributed over several meters, local temperature changes are limited throughout these cases. If we slightly decrease the cliff face to 250 meters, the driving forces for the shear band are reduced and it no longer links to the initial surface crevasse, reducing the amount of ice lost due to cliff failure. Finally, considering a cliff at 0 degrees, we can see that a 150-meter cliff already becomes unstable, compared to the 400 meters that was stable at -15 degrees. To conclude, this video abstract summarized the results from our paper and provided animated versions of the figures therein. For a more detailed overview of the equations used, finite element discretization applied, and material parameters used, please refer to the paper.